Hello, everyone. As Jill said, I'm Eric Taub, and I write about healthcare technology and other aspects of technology, mostly for the New York Times. And as you may have heard, people say that journalists have knowledge a mile wide and an inch deep. And so I'm honored to be part of this panel, often when you go to these panels, there's always a joke and everyone gets serious after that. So since we have such a short period of time, I'll make a joke and then everyone will get serious. I was reminded of when Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, published his first consumer-oriented book, Man and His Symbols. He had a preface written by a BBC reporter, and in the preface, the BBC reporter said, I was really honored that Dr. Jung asked me to write the preface. And he said, Dr. Jung, I'm so honored that you entrusted me writing the preface for your book. And he said, no, the reason I asked you to do it is I figured if you could understand what I wrote, anybody could. So here I am with some people doing some very important, serious work. And Bill Evans, who's the chief marketing officer for IBM Watson Health, and it came on board fairly recently, I believe. As Jill said, we all know about IBM Watson through the famous Jeopardy situation, but you're completely involved in healthcare, and perhaps you could bring our audience up to speed on what you're doing, what you want to do, and what some of the challenges you have.
Yeah, so I think we all know that the economics are unstable in the current healthcare environment, and so not only the economics are unstable, the amount of data being produced is also unstable. Roughly half of all practice medicine is not evidence-based, and there's roughly 1.7 million journal articles being published every year on new discoveries, new therapies, new treatments, et cetera. And that amount of information is simply incomprehensible to the human mind. So if you think about during the Industrial Revolution, the demand for goods and services outpaced the ability for humans to produce them. And we're living in a knowledge revolution where the demand for insights and information around data is being outpaced by our ability to comprehend them. So at its base level, what we're trying to do at Watson Health is use the power of Watson and cognitive technology to create interoperable sets of data with an intelligence on top of it to amplify the human capability of the physician, to help us make smarter diagnostic decisions, help us make smarter treatment decisions, make better personal decisions about our health and wellness, et cetera.
But of course, you're not the only company doing this. And how do you see your advantage compared to your competition?
Well, we've been at this a long time, and I think that the interesting thing about a cognitive system is that it thinks, reasons, understands, and learns. So this is a system that understands natural language. It understands how to work with a human being on a personal level, and you train it, you don't program it. So as opposed to working within a systems of rules or a spreadsheet or formulas or things like that, it learns over time the problems that you're trying to solve and makes you a better decision maker because it arms you with information and confidence levels to help you understand the data in front of you.
Mm-hmm. And now I remember that about a year ago, IBM announced a major capital investment in this whole area.
Yes.
And how have you found, I know when you and I chatted earlier, you had mentioned it wasn't such completely smooth sailing to move ahead into Watson Health. You've had some challenges, I think, because of the FDA requirements?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think the whole industry is at its infancy. I mean, the reason this session is called the dawn of the cognitive era is these technologies are just starting to become a reality for the marketplace. One of the reasons I think you saw in our keynote for IBM yesterday and why we have distinguished partners on stage is that we're now in an instance where the technology of Watson, specifically of healthcare, is impacting the marketplace today. For instance, for any of you out there that are developers or are interested in using Watson, we have a platform, an open platform called Bluemix. You can go to ibm.com/Bluemix. You can try out the 33 currently available instances of the Watson technology. So we can literally build cognition into any application being developed in the market today.
Okay, so the reason, by the way, we have two other guests sitting next to us is because they are, I think, the first partners that are now working with Bill in Watson Health.
Not just me. There's an army of people.
No. By the way, how many people do you have in your group?
I believe, and my PR friends will correct me, I think Watson Health right now is currently about 2,000 people strong and growing. So there's a reason why our CEO calls this IBM's moonshot and is putting the weight and emphasis of the organization behind it.
Okay. So seated next to Bill are Annette Brules, who's the president of Diabetes Service and Solutions for Medtronic, and also Dr. Michael Nover, who's the Chief Innovation Officer for Pathway Genomics. And so, of course, we'd like to hear from both of you as to what you're doing, how you're working with IBM, and what you've learned and what you hope to learn.
Sure.
Annette,
Should I
please.
get it
Yeah,
started?
please do.
Well, you know, we are extremely excited about the partnership. We have announced this back in April, and we have made tremendous progress since. So why are we excited about this and why we want to be part of this cognitive era, and we really believe it can transform diabetes disease, is because diabetes is actually a big data disease. If you think about it, diabetes, the challenge with diabetes is to manage your glucose level. How do you get your glucose level under control? If you're a person with diabetes, you have to think about this all the time. You see your doctor maybe 10 minutes every 3 months. In between those visits, it's up to you to make the right decisions, the right activity levels, the right meal intake, the right medication, the right lifestyle to keep your glucose under control. And that's hugely important and hugely challenging for every patient who is confronted with diabetes. So the beauty of our collaboration is that we at Medtronic are the leading medical device company in this area, and we have brought innovation to market that allows you to get the data out of the dark. If you are a person with diabetes, until now or until recently, you had to prick your finger, take a little bit of blood, put it into a measurement machine, and you would get one glucose level, one data point based on which you need to make a lot of decisions. With recent technologies, we have diabetes wearables, kind of wearable sensors, insulin pumps that allow you to get continuous information about your glucose correlated with your insulin intake. So we get the data out of the dark, not only out of the dark, but into your smartphone real time. So that's a major step, because now you can see what your glucose is continuously, and that can help you make the right decision. How do we take this further and really impact care is by collaborating with Watson. We have the data on the phone. How do we make sure that we provide actionable insights, that people can actually make the right decision, don't have to think about what did I eat during the day, how much exercise did I have, when did I have my last insulin intake. All of that information becomes available, and not only can be displayed on your phone, but Watson can, through the Watson cognitive computing power, look at patterns. We have plenty of patient data. We have 150 million patient days that Watson can look through, identify patterns, understand how do an individual person compared to other persons, start to predict clinical events, start to provide recommendations, and really, at the end of the day, create your personal diabetes assistant. That's the goal of our collaboration. And at this particular meeting, we have already announced the first research work results, which have shown that we are able to predict a potentially severe hypoglycemic event up to 3 hours in advance, in time for somebody to take action and really manage the diabetes disease in a better fashion. And that's just the first step. It's the research work. We are now gearing up towards commercialization, and there will be many more iterations. But at the end, it's really combining medical device data, bringing it out of the dark, combining it with cognitive computing power, giving insights and action that can lead to better outcome.
So in this one instance, if you
Yes.
did not have the connection with IBM, would you be able to predict a hypoglycemic incident at any distance ahead of time?
Actually, we do this partly in our devices already.
Yeah.
But it's based on pure glucose trends. We don't have any of the context, we don't have any of the cognitive computing power, but we know that the influence or the glucose levels are influenced by many, many factors. Exogenous data can help us to understand those, and now we can predict much more in advance, and it can become a real lifestyle diabetes assistant thanks to this new collaboration.
Much more in advance, and I presume much
Yeah.
more reliably as well.
Well, at least taking into account all the context that is surrounding a patient and really making more actionable recommendations.
But the patient still has to input some information into their device what they're eating or something like
Yeah,
that.
so here, this is a very good point. So here's another really exciting aspect of our collaboration. Of course, we have glucose data, we have insulin data, we have a lot of information already from the patient coming from our medical devices. As we stream this real time through the smartphones into the Watson cloud, we have now a whole ecosystem of other partners and information sources that we can link into. You can imagine activity trackers, fitness information, nutrition intake. There's actually partners who are looking at localizing you and providing insights into restaurant menus. Really, all that information becomes easily available so that we can reduce the amount of input that the patient has to make and really take advantage of all the information that is surrounding us through the Watson ecosystem and integrating it into our intelligence and making our insights, recommendations even more powerful.
Do you find with people who have diabetes that they're less inclined to be proactive in entering data and tracking themselves, because isn't the issue itself that they don't always take their insulin?
Yeah, and I think it's for everybody. I mean, the more you have to enter, the more complex an app or anything is, the less likely you are to use it. So it's really our goal to make it as least entry as possible, and through such a system as we are building, we can actually do that. So I think it's going to be a big advantage, will increase compliance, usage, and the usefulness of the system overall.
Yeah, because I could imagine that the forcing people to actually do something is very difficult. Reminds me, I know Samsung just introduced a refrigerator yesterday in which there are cameras inside, and then when you're in the grocery store, you look at your app and you see what you need to refill. So I asked the fellow, well, how do you know? You see a milk container, how do you know if it's empty or full? He said, well, because you enter the expiration date of the milk on the screen on the refrigerator. I said, nobody's going to do that. This is ridiculous. Some parent who has barely enough time to go to the grocery store, nobody's going to. So you really need to cut back on all of this.
It has to be easy, and it has to be evolving, it has to be dynamic, and also the system is learning, so it will get better and better and have more and more information about you, so you need to enter even less. So I think that's the beauty of the entire system.
So on a practical level, where are you at now with the collaboration? How far are you along? How many people are in the study and so on?
So we have done a lot of steps already. We have done our research work, and as I said, we have a tremendous amount of data available at Medtronic, and we have this data has been made available to the Watson teams, and so we have started to use the prediction models and really understand how far can we go into predicting hypoglycemia, providing advisory. And so we have validated the model now on a 600 patient basis, and we continue to evolve this. And from here, the goal is to really move into the first commercially available version of the app in the summertime.
Oh, okay, great. So, Dr. Michael Nover, your company, Pathway Genomics, is doing some very interesting work in terms of different kinds of testing. Please tell us about what you're doing with your collaboration with IBM.
Right, and we're also very excited about our collaboration. I think we were one of the first. We're about a year into the collaboration with IBM. And we're a genetic testing. We started out as a genetic testing company, and we do any kind of genetic test, doctors ordered, anything from drug metabolism to food, nutrition, exercise, carrier testing, whole genome sequencing. So we have a fairly large laboratory, and we sell our tests in 44 different countries. And so we have a big customer base, and through this, the company's about 6 years old and 7 years old, and through this customer base and through our physicians that order, we kind of have a pretty good feel for what a consumer potentially would like to have in an application. And since there isn't any denser data when it comes to healthcare than genetics, I think one whole genome sequence is about 500 gigabytes of data. So, and you generate in your lifetime about 2 terabytes of medical data. There's some numbers like that. So, how can we leverage our genetic testing capability into a consumer application where we don't use just genetics in a vacuum? Our clinicians use genetics or omics technology as part of a toolkit for their patients, right? So you can't take a gene. I've got a gene for this, and then that's it. What do I do with it, right? Is it a risk gene, or is it a gene around metabolism? Is it a gene around sugar? Cravings. There's genes that influence even our behaviors. I was listening to one of the earlier panels, And changing people's behavior is really difficult, right? So we got to thinking about, how can we take all this massive amounts of medical data that doesn't talk to each other, and there are tons of different sensors and Fitbits and whatever, and they're all part of the issue. As a physician, I've always kind of practiced personalized medicine, but I never had any tools to do it, right? So now we've got all these tools sitting out there, but what does all that data mean, right? And my glucose is increased, but that's fine. What do I do with it? It's just like it's all this massive amounts of disparate data in different silos, right? And so we got to thinking about how can we take all that and leverage it into a consumer-facing application for things that people want to do on a daily basis. And we found out with our sales force and targeting our physicians that most people don't go around thinking about, I've got a potential gene for Alzheimer's disease. They don't do that. They don't, or I've got risk for cardio. They don't do that. What they think about is what to eat, where to exercise. Is this food good for me? Is this diet plan the best for me? I mean, there's a huge article that came out from the NIH last week that basically obesity is not treatable. With all diets don't work. On obesity, you have to silo basically the diets based on some sort of genetics, and this was coming out of the NIH. We never would have heard that 5 years ago. So one of our most popular tests is a test called Pathway Fit, and it's around nutrition and exercise. It's about 75 different genes. And so we've leveraged that into this application that we're doing with IBM Watson Cognitive called OHM, which we alpha launched today. And what it does is the genetic test, we use the results around this genetic test around diet, nutrition, and exercise to personalize things for the user. So if you've got a potential gene in this particular metabolism pathway, maybe that avocado isn't good for you. Or maybe you should be eating at this restaurant, not that restaurant. Or doing this exercise, not that
This
exercise.
is not something you've been able to do until now?
No, because the base part of genetics is kind of your blueprint, your human blueprint. That we all know that you don't respond to certain things the same way I would. So you metabolize fats in an avocado based on your genetics. I do it differently. So a low-carb diet might not be good for you, but I don't know that, right? Unless I do some sort of test, some sort of genetic test, or have some sort of information around in a way to personalize that. So we developed this application using cognitive and natural language processing. It was a very difficult task because you're talking about now also integrating in wearables and making it dynamic. So if you ask the application, what should I eat for lunch? And you ask that, and you get an answer, and we have a genetic test or some information about you, some personalized information. It might change 10 minutes later because you walked around the block and you dropped 100 calories. So it's a dynamic, a moving part all the time around the database, and we couldn't have done it without some sort of cognitive, machine learning technology that uses all this information and siloed information and makes inferences across these silos. That's what cognitive really is very good at doing.
And of course, the longer you do it, the more accurate
it gets. And you can add, cholesterol tests and, just daily habits, what you eat, what you don't eat. There's a whole image recognition thing that's coming with IBM Qardio. We're very interested in that. That's a potential way of logging in information where you don't have to write things down, right? Logging in a plate of food or logging in my extra or doing something, where I totally agree that people don't want to do anything. They just want the app to take care of me. And so that's what we're kind of building. We're building this kind of sidekick or personal, healthcare or wellness device that kind of follows you around on a daily basis.
So you mentioned you announced this today. So how far along are you?
Yeah, it's an alpha launch today, and alpha means there's certain large companies that are trialing it, and then we'll obviously move it along and move it into beta and get it out for general consumer use toward the end of the year.
To your point about people not wanting to enter data, and that you then rely on various devices that people wear, but is there not also an issue about people not wanting to wear devices? Because we see that, Fitbit is still a niche product. It's not something that's widely accepted. People, not jumping into Apple Watches, for example. I'm sorry?
It's true, but everybody has a phone.
Right.
That's right.
And I mean, you can sit on a donkey in the middle of the desert and be starving, but you've got your cell phone, and it's probably a smartphone. Right. And if it's a Samsung smartphone, it's got a heart rate detector, infrared, O2 monitor. It's going to have more and more and more capability. And those are all data sinks.
Okay.
Those are all sources of data that we can use and, in this application.
Yeah.
I would also argue, I don't know that people don't want to wear sensors. I mean, if you walk the health floor out here, everybody's betting on sensors.
Yeah.
But I think the largest challenge has been that the information collected off the sensors isn't intelligent. It's analytics. So how many times did you do something? What's the correlation in the data? It doesn't tell you what it means or give you any insight. So the adoption of sensor technology, while becoming more ubiquitous and transparent to our lives, is only going to be meaningful if there's an intelligence or a cognitive system that actually can tell you what's important in the data and how to take an action from it, which I think is the missing component to most of what I saw out there on the show floor yesterday.
Why don't you talk a bit about the visual recognition work that you're...
Sure. So Watson Health acquired a company called Merge a little while ago, and it'll be a bit before we've integrated that into the core Watson technology. But at its base, Merge is a company that has very sophisticated optical image recognition capabilities around radiological data. So an average radiologist in a hospital system may see 100,000 scans a day. So you can imagine the data overload and the amount of margin for error that comes in that type of diagnostic situation. So we feel like it's a natural fit to introduce Watson into that environment to help the radiologist make sense of the data, understand the data, what does it mean, what does this type of tuner or anomaly correspond to something else. I hope that person's okay. It's the next evolution of where medical technology goes. And as we talk about the amount of video that's produced on the internet, the amount of images that are generated in the medical system is just astronomical.
Right.
Is there, we're talking about sensing, is there a point where we're getting too much data? I know I heard somebody a fellow from Silicon Valley the other day say, we could get to the point where we could be having somebody sensed or have sensors getting data constantly on somebody, and perhaps one day know that somebody's going to get pancreatic cancer 6 months before they do, because we're always watching changes. Can you get too much data, or never enough?
I don't
think so.
Yeah, we both agree on this. I don't think, and especially in healthcare is the most data-dense business there is. And go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all about what do you do with the data.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't want to overwhelm nor the healthcare provider nor the patients. You want to have as much data as you can to provide the best insights possible, but make it easy on the user front. I think that's where I think the danger is. And so as long as we can digest it, we have the computing power and the cognitive power to make sense out of it, the more we have, the better it's going to get.
Yep.
So I think that's not a
problem.
not a problem.
And no problem for you at IBM, bringing it in. You've got plenty of capacity.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, that's all the time we have.
Thank you
Thank you both, all three of you, for participating in this.
Excellent job.